While others celebrate the wins,
Yes.
We celebrate the mud.
each episode has a special guest.
Tony-nominated actress, Broadway's Lily Cooper.
Tashir Zameda.
David A. Gregory.
Getting messy with muddy topics.
We are going to be talking about grief journey.
With hilarious moments
Now get over here.
And deep conversations.
I'm ashamed to even admit this, but this is what happened.
This is Into the Mud.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Into the Mud podcast. While others celebrate the wins,
We celebrate the mud.
I'm Drew King.
I'm Alex Geta. We are coming to you live from the Barrow Room in the Mall in West Village in New York City. And today we are talking about something, like a little bit meta. We're gonna get muddy with being a beginner,
Yeah.
right? And
Beginner mindset as an adult, and what does it mean to be a beginner, and what does it mean to create and build something new, and how terribly muddy that can feel. How exciting and inspiring,
Yes.
but the muddiness of being a beginner.
Yes.
Because we are deeply entrenched in that right now as even as we build this podcast.
This is for sure new territory for both of us, even though we're in, theater and comedy and performative spaces. I think that like the podcast space is a different arena. And we taught, we had the idea for this, was it like last year, and started putting thoughts together. And I think we were so excited about it initially, and we still are so excited about it. And there is a lot of muddiness that comes with learning how to do a new thing, being a beginner as an adult who has lots of other adult friends who are succeeding very well in this same arena. The feelings of comparison,
Shame, embarrassment.
Frustration of we're doing all the right things and what's going, and I think I think we're both doing a pretty good job of like understanding that we are in the beginning season of this, and we are planting the seeds, and we can't. I heard something recently about like being aware of what season you're in. Are you in the planting or nurturing or harvesting? Or harvesting, right? And you can't plant a seed and then the next day be frustrated that it doesn't have a harvest already.
I do that all the time.
Yeah,
I'm like,
so do I.
grow. Why are you growing? You should have grown already. Grow now.
I've given you 2 days to grow. How come you're not fully formed?
Do you think that's part of us as a generation, maybe like being part of social media generation, that we need immediate gratification because we have technology that serves us things so quickly, that there is part of us that learning a new skill or a new craft or being a beginner at something that takes extreme amounts of time by nature now, because we're trained with having a computer in our hands so quickly, we just want things to just happen immediately?
I think it's partly that. I think it's also just a learning and growing as an adult thing. Like something I've been doing a lot of just reflection about career stuff lately and life stuff in general. And I tend to journal a lot. I do a lot of goal setting. I do a lot of like check-ins with myself. And I looked recently at some goals that I had set for myself. It was like a page that I had lost in a notebook. And I had achieved all of the things on that list that I had written down.
Look at you.
But not on the timeline that I thought that they were going to be at, and not in the way that I thought they would come to, one of them, I remember years ago being like, I want to move to New York and have a comedy job in New York. And it's like, okay, you got both of those things, and they just look a little bit different than what you had in your mind. But I am coming to realize that it's just accepting that stuff takes time. Like really having to accept all of the things that your life is not going to pass you by, kind of thing. The things meant for you are not going to pass you by. And this stuff, what we were just talking about, where, when you feel those moments of jealousy or envy, whether it's through another person or a thing that someone has, that's actually just a reflection of the things that you want the most, and to use those feelings of envy as maps, as roadmaps of like, you know, I've been switching into this new phrase. Instead of like, oh, I wish I had that, I now say, what would it take for me to have that? What would it take for me to get the thing that person has that I want? Because the reason that you want it so bad is because some version of your future self already has it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're right, it's going to take time to build up to even get those things. I find myself just being deeply impatient in the midst of being a beginner. Like I said earlier, maybe it's, I don't know, social media, or it's just human nature to want to be like, just get it done. And in particular with this pod, I'm loving it. Like I'm having such a blast. Yeah. I'm having to flex new muscles creatively, technically. But damn, it's really fucking hard. Yes. Like we are both spending exorbitant amounts of hours to edit and copy and paste, like, you know, these reels together for social media, and then building a website and coordinating guests and coming in and being like, what are we going to talk about? What are we feeling muddy about? And I am feeling, while, you know, similarly that I am loving every moment of it, I'm also fucking struggling. Yeah. Like it's really hard to, I don't know, like I pulled an all-nighter the other night on vacation, editing the episode to get it out by Thursday, make sure it was out by Thursday because I had procrastinated, but also it's taking me hours and hours and hours, in particular, unpaid hours to get the editing done. It's getting quicker and I'm learning, but oh my God, sitting down in front of my computer and looking at, for instance, Final Cut Pro and being like, what is this language? It feels like I had to walk into another country without speaking the language, and then immediately I'm beating myself up because I don't speak the language and I can't communicate and get the job done. Yeah, it's been like that on so many areas with audio, with even the way that we're setting up these lights and these cameras, and how do we adjust, and what do we make look good, what do we make look bad, and then as I'm editing, being like, fuck, it's blurry, or it doesn't look like that, or I want it to look like this.
Sound is off.
The sound is off. Blah 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 blah. And like we're learning every. Yes. And the only way we're gonna learn is by making these mistakes. But like it is so hard. Yeah. As a perfectionist, I'm like a lifelong perfectionist. I'm sure you are as well. Yeah. To consistently be failing constantly. Yeah. In the midst of being a beginner. Well, it's so challenging. I'm really struggling with it, and I beat myself up a lot because of it. Yeah.
And I want to call attention to the word failing, and like sort of unpack what failing means to you. Like it's another word that I have to catch myself with, because failing is, you know, I always think of the, like, who was it, like Edison or whatever, who inventing the light bulb took you know, however many tries, and he said something to the tune of like, I just found 499 ways it didn't work. Like, we are like, with each like misstep or with each like failure, it's like, well, it doesn't mean that's the end of it. It just means that we went this way and there's a wall here, so we go this way, and maybe there's going to be a wall over here, but we won't find out until we get there. Yeah. And it's a constant process of like refinement, and it's frustrating because you know, in like Buddhism, there's all this talk of like beginner's mindset and like finding curiosity and continuing to be curious. And I think that is a trait that children have that is wonderful, that we completely lose as adults. Yeah. We stop making it okay to fail. We stop making we stop making it okay to try new things, because once you hit a certain age, you're supposed to know what your thing is and do that thing. And that's American culture too, really like slammed into us. But I don't know. When you hit a failure, when you hit a place that isn't working for you, what's your thought process? How does that like show up for you internally?
I want to like phone a friend and like get my therapist in on this conversation. Yeah. Yeah. It's probably one of the number one things that I'm always talking about with him is the in the midst of rejection and or failure, the spiral that I go down and the thought process that I go into. Yeah, I thought that, especially having been an actor and being in musical theater, we're constantly facing rejection every single day, rejection and or failure. And I thought that rejection would get easier the older that I got, but it's getting harder for me, really hard. And so when things don't work out, I tend to look for things that confirm, like, oh, see, you are a failure, or see, you're going to mess up.
Negative confirmation bias.
Yes, exactly, which Brene Brown also talks about.
Yeah.
If you're looking for things to confirm that you are not good enough, you are going to find the things that will confirm that you are not good enough. And I'm really good at finding those things, and I'm really good at stockpiling them, of being like, well, this date with this guy didn't work out, but it's also, he's similar to the same with that guy, and that guy, and that guy, and blah, blah, blah. Or that job. Like, I'm good at stockpiling. Not that I'm saying it's good, but meaning like I've developed a really great talent of going into that shame spiral and it's wanting things to work out and be easier and better, and not wanting to be a beginner at something, or feeling like a failure now. It's like, okay, well, I failed so long ago when I first started auditioning, and I'm still failing now, which is not true at all. It's like my failure has been growing. I've only been growing. Failure is growth.
Yeah.
But sometimes in the midst of my like self-deprecation or insecurities, I go down like a massive shame spiral with it.
Totally.
What is it for you?
It's similar. Well, I have a couple of things I wanted to say. So the first of which, when you said failure feels like it's getting harder as you get older, I remember talking to someone about this recently, where like you think that it should get easier, or that you should get more accustomed to it. And it's like, no, it's just opportunities get bigger. Get bigger. And so the not getting the thing sometimes feels a little harder. But I think it's similar to what we've talked about with grief, where it's like, stop trying to make the grief smaller. Stop trying, like, just learn how to expand around it. How do you build yourself? How do you build up the capabilities to combat that kind of thing? I have been doing a ton of work on my negative voice and the negative self-talk that happens when I fail, or when I have a bad set, when I don't get a job, when I don't, simple as when I don't go to the gym, whatever the thing is, whatever the little minor thing is. And I am working on just like radical acceptance of where I am, of just like, oh, you didn't get the thing. Stop assigning meaning to that. Stop translating that to, you didn't get this, which means that you are bad. I just saw Inside Out 2. Have you seen it?
I haven't seen it yet, but Inside Out 1 wrecks me. But I really, talk to me.
Inside Out, to me, is like Pixar's
finest work.
I absolutely loved that movie. Inside Out 2 was incredible, and without spoiling too much, one of the through lines is that the main character, Riley, she's a teenager now and is navigating all these new feelings, right? All the new feelings that come in.
A beginner as a teenager.
She's a beginner as a teenager, and the sort of core belief about herself throughout her life has been, I'm a good person. And the movie starts to push on that a little bit with giving her different situations that she has to act in different ways with. And I really loved, again, I don't want to like give the movie away because it's still like out in theaters. And
she dies. It's fine.
Honestly.
Yeah. Her inside emotions.
They take over.
And she dies.
And she's dead. And that's sort of a lesson to just push your emotions down.
Push your emotions down, and death. Yeah.
Hard. It essentially goes on this idea of like, we are complex people and nobody is perfect. And stop trying to, and what is good about perfect? Nobody can do it. It's an unattainable goal, and it's, there is no such thing. And that has been so helpful for me to come back to, even since just like seeing it, of like, we are many things at once. We can be a good person who makes mistakes and missteps. We can be a person who shows up for our friends and who drops the ball sometimes. And that we are all of those things. And when you there's no selective blocking of your personality. Like you have to accept all parts of yourself.
Of course.
And so I'm, even we spoke about this in our last solo episode, but we were at the Comedy Cellar, and I had a moment of anxiety of, what if I don't do well? And had to take a moment and acknowledge that part of my brain that is there because it wants to protect me, is there because it doesn't want me to look like a fool in front of 200 people and friends.
Yeah.
And I just acknowledged it and I said, thanks so much for being here. I will take it from here.
Good for you.
Mommy knows how to do this.
Yeah.
But it was a new experience for me.
That's a growth moment.
That was for sure a growth moment, because a lot of times I just succumb to that anxiety and I walk on stage with the nerves, and I'm a professional. I know how to shake them off, but learning how to keep that off the stage, learning how to just keep those thoughts in check, is so important. And I don't know. I think like just accepting, like, I'm not going to be perfect all the time. I don't know who is, and that it's actually easier to move from that space than it is to be like, you didn't do this perfectly well, you better do it perfectly well next time.
Yeah.
When has that worked? When has that ever worked?
Yeah. Never works.
Never works.
I think about perfectionism as a beginner, and I have to, I always, or again, I talk about it with my therapist plenty, but where does it come from and why do I feel that way? So why can't I just embrace this podcast and be like, I love it, we're having fun, we're making mistakes, and roll with the punches? But why do I need every single little thing to be perfect? The sound has to be perfect, the visuals have to be perfect, we have to get as many followers or listens or downloads or blah blah blah, like everything I'm needing to be perfect. This is a passion project for us. This is a hobby right now. We have other things that we're doing in our lives, but what is it about perfectionism? And I have to analyze the other areas in my life that I cling to needing to be perfect. I need to be the perfect first date. I need to be the perfect at my job, or the most perfect employee at my job. I need to be perfect in dance class. I need to be perfect at the gym. I need this audition to be perfect. And it all boils down to protection. It's a matter of needing to protect my identity, because the fear is that I learned as a kid that if you're not perfect, you are not loved and you are rejected. And that's so terrifying. It's a manner of self-preservation. So much of being a beginner that gets challenged goes way further back than we even think that it does.
Totally.
Because it was my opportunity as a kid to find love, was when I had perfect grades, when I was perfect on stage, when I was the perfect friend, and even when I was the perfect son and was really struggling with my stepfather. And not getting the care and the love that I needed from certain spaces. I learned that, well, if I can show up being perfect and be a perfectionist, I have control. I have control over where people love me, where they don't love me, where I'm getting validation, where I'm getting love and care and comfort. It felt like a tool for control, but it's not. We don't have control over all that. And it helped me in certain areas. It was a not a defense mechanism. It was a survival tactic that got me through, that is now no longer serving me later on in life. We've talked about this.
Right.
And it's really hard for me to let go, because I can't take something, it's hard for me to take something joyful like this and beautiful. And my fear is that, I'm going to say something and everyone's going to be like, I can't believe you said that on the podcast. Or my family's going to listen and be like, why would you do that? Or why would you say that? Or people, are going to look and be like, how horrible is their editing? That's terrible. Or like, man, I can't believe they call themselves a podcast, but their audio quality is terrible. Like all of these things, because I don't have control over these things, because I am a beginner.
Yeah.
Instead of me just letting both of us like letting it just be like a fun frou-frou thing and it's a passion project, we're loving these beautiful conversations we get to have with our dearest friends.
Yeah.
And each other.
Yeah.
But perfectionism and the need for perfectionism as a survival tactic is like really holding me back, and I'm really trying to breathe and challenge it and let us make mistakes as we go and stumble and fail. And like maybe one of these cameras will die right now and it'll be a mess. Maybe somebody will walk in the room and it's okay. The world's not going to end if that happens.
Right.
But oof, it's hard for me.
Yeah. I okay. There's so many dots. I've talked a lot with my therapist about like the locus of control, right? So like when it's an external, when you put the control outside of you and you're like, well, what if this person thinks this way about me? You have no control over how anyone thinks about you. The other cool thing is that I think about a lot is that nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody cares.
Nobody's thinking about you.
Nobody's thinking about you because everyone is thinking about themselves. Everyone is thinking about themselves. Yeah. But knowing that and practicing it and believing it are two different things, right? Yeah. So like it's like the confirmation bias, right? When you're constantly looking for all of the wrong things, you're going to be overloaded with the wrong things. So the stuff that I have found that really helps with all this is like gratitude journaling, and like every morning just waking up, whether it's like, and really looking for big and small things. Yeah. Like I'm grateful that I have like a delicious breakfast that's available for me today. I'm grateful for the way that the sunlight is coming into my kitchen. I'm grateful that I'm living in a safe place right now, like big and small. And it really does help in the long term to be like taking note of all that stuff. But
also just it's hard. We tend to get so hyper focused on these tiny little things that we forget to have some freaking perspective. Yeah.
Which is, I think, just human nature. Even it's a thing. I remember talking to Shayla, one of our previous podcast guests, about having cancer, and when you're like in the thick of it and you're like having the worst time, and like that's, all the other small stuff starts to fall away. But then, hopefully you get through it and the little stuff starts to come up again. Like it's like, God, traffic. It's like where maybe 6 months prior you're in the thick of the worst medical experience of your life and you're like, well, I'm never going to worry about anything insignificant ever again. It's like, that's just not how it works.
A new lease on life.
It's a new lease on life. It's like, no, just sometimes things will always come up. I think also it's something I struggle with as well, is what people think. What will others think? Yet again, we have to hit our quota of one Brené Brown reference per episode. The Daring Greatly, the book, and the was it Roosevelt? Was it a speech, a Roosevelt speech?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I believe it's Roosevelt. Yeah. About being in the arena.
About being in the arena, and it's like that's something I really have to cling to. Is like I cannot pay attention to anyone who's not actively in the arena.
Yeah.
I'm in it.
Anyone's criticism, for those that don't know this reference, it is a famous Roosevelt quote. God, I hope it's Roosevelt. We're not getting this wrong.
I think it's a Roosevelt. I think it's it was a whole speech. Yeah.
Okay. And Brené Brown used one of the references to title her book, which is called Daring Greatly. And essentially it is saying you don't need to, don't pay attention to anybody's criticism unless they are there with you in the arena. The people, if you're fighting in the arena to make something or create something or be a beginner at something and you've shown up
and you're
muddy
fighting
and
you're
muddy
bloody
and messy and sweaty, like you can't pay attention to what the critics in the stands are saying, because it's so easy to be far removed and sit on the sidelines and criticize somebody for doing something than it is to be in the mud, in the thick of it, in the arena with somebody going through it with them. Yes. And that's whose criticism you should be paying attention to.
Yeah.
Still take it with a grain of salt, but like...
Totally. And even just focusing more on rather than like criticism of like other people in the arena, just even like just learning like to make non-judgmental observations. Like that's been my new like task, is like, what are you like, you're feeling nervous about this, you're feeling just, I'm learning to turn towards the moments of pain and discomfort now, rather than running from them or being like, I don't want to feel that way. It's like, what's going on here? Let's unpack this. Where did this come from? And so much of it comes from childhood. And what I am finding is that the most helpful stuff for me right now is continuing to visit the little 6-year-old Alex and tell her, you're doing a great job. You're even like, yesterday I had this moment where I like walked by my closet, and I've been trying to reorganize my closet for a couple weeks, and I was supposed to do it this weekend, and I didn't have time. And I walk by the closet and I just go, oh, you're such a piece of shit. Said that out loud to myself over a closet. And it's like, and I literally stopped myself and I said out loud, okay, pause. You are not a piece of shit. It's clothes.
But you are a loser.
But you are a loser.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Loser.
Disgusting.
Carry on.
I had to stop and reprogram my brain and just go, you didn't fold your clothes. That's okay. If you want to do it, you will find time to do that this weekend. How insidious that and how frequent that happens is something that I'm paying attention to more, because I found that all of this other stuff starts to melt away, the comparison and the what are other people going to think and this and that, when I start being nice to myself, which is a very new thing for me. I've never been nice to myself.
Yeah.
It's very hard.
Same.
And all from childhood, and all from this need of, if I do it perfectly, I will be okay. And that is like also not true. You cannot make a mistake and still have a bad thing happen.
Correct. Correct.
So it's just really just holding, I think, all parts of it. And as we talk about, you know, just being a beginner, being new in this space, I'm trying more to just hold on to like a childlike curiosity about stuff.
Yeah.
Of just like, how can I, rather than like, how can we make it the best? It's like, how can we be the most curious? How can we, and encourage failure, right? Encourage like, let's try this. Let's see if this works.
Yeah.
Let's go for this grant. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Let's, you know.
Well, failure is necessary. It is necessary. And in other chapters of my life, I have been able to embrace failure. For some reason, it's just been really hard for me lately. I think because in the midst of this hypothetical career transition, where I'm leaving this thing that I was, you know, incredibly successful at. I was at.
Talk to us about where you're at with that, with career transition.
Yeah, it's, you know, I'm tiptoeing out of the business of musical theater, at least in particular, you know, being a chorus boy. So I'm so grateful and fortunate. It's outrageous that I even was able to succeed at the highest level. You know, I got a Broadway show, I got another Broadway show, I've done film and TV. I've checked off all the boxes that I wanted to do, which blows my mind that even was able to happen. And also was born out of me being a beginner. I moved to New York City at 18 and I was not a dancer. And then now I primarily worked as a dancer most of my career. I had to force my way through that, and I had to be a beginner, and it was really challenging. I had to show up as an 18-year-old in these dance classes with people who have been dancing since they were 2 and fail consistently every single day. I didn't see it as failure because I was so joyful in it and I loved it. But it was, you know, I had to keep falling on my ass consistently. I had to, you know, fall out of my pirouettes. I had to not jump high enough. I had to have figure out how to manipulate my body to do these things that will make this career come to me if I want this to happen. So it was constantly being in failure. But now I think in the midst of this transition, I'm still trying to figure out what's next. And the in-between spaces are really painful and really challenging, as we've talked about. And I don't know how to allow myself to be a beginner in the midst of this transition. Like it's, I've been writing a lot. I started taking a lot of screenwriting courses, and of course, I immediately wanted to be like, great. So I'm leaving Broadway, and then now I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna go win an Oscar for my screenplay. Or okay, now I'm gonna, I'm leaving Broadway, but I'm gonna go and have a 5 million following podcast. Or I'm leaving Broadway. I'm not giving myself the ability to say, hey, I'm gonna show up into this new field, this new arena, whatever it may be curious, figure it out, go. It's this need to be exceptional is what is not allowing me to be a beginner, or I become a beginner and then I beat myself up about it because I'm like, God, you should be better. You're smarter than this. Or I compare myself to other people who have made a seemingly easy transition from, oh, I was on Broadway, but now I'm doing this other thing. Like I've started a business and wow, it took off and exploded. And I'm like, wow, how come they could go make that transition so seamlessly, but I can't do it? Or what's holding, and it's been really challenging for me because you want to succeed, and that's validation, love, and then people are like, yay, Drew. Like nobody wants to hear the conversation of like, I'm having a really hard time. Right. Everyone wants to be like, oh, thank God, you're great. You got a good job, you're nailing it. Yeah. All good, great. People don't want to hear about the in-between space of, I don't know. That's the other thing. I was an expert here. Like I'm at the top of my I was at the top of my field as a performer, as a dancer. I knew how to get into being in a Broadway audition with the best dancers in the city. Like how exhilarating, how cool. And knowing that like this is the top of the top. Like this is the Olympics of theater in New York City. This is Broadway. And then to start over and go to the ABCs of learning something new, that jump is really an ego punch. Totally. It's exciting, but because of my thought patterns and my spirals, it's been really challenging for me.
I think this reminds me so much of a quote. Some years are questions and some years are answers.
I love that.
And when you said you're feeling really like, why can't I be a beginner? Instead of having that be the wall, have that be the question that you're that this is the year that you uncover that, or that you ask yourself, why is it hard? And instead of why is it hard,
beating myself up,
the curiosity of why is this hard, right? And like I'm very similarly in this like liminal space has been just showing up, just popping up for me everywhere lately. Reading about it and feeling like I'm in it. And liminal space is this idea that you are...
define liminal space.
Yeah, liminal space is this idea that you are in the in-between stages. So you're not where you were before, but you're not quite where you are looking ahead. And it's defined often by like muddiness, murkiness, uncertainty, discomfort. And it is an essential piece of the path.
You can't have anything without the liminal spaces.
And where I feel right now, I feel similarly career-wise, where I am finding that I don't have the energy to sustain the schedule that I have been doing for the last decade. And it scares me a little bit to realize like, this is not sustainable for me. But it's also kind of freeing to be like, all right, so make the change. So do less of the late night stuff and more of the daytime stuff. But it is this very uncomfortable feeling of having to reevaluate what my income is going to look like and reevaluate I'm being an expert in an area and trying to be a beginner in a podcast arena, in a solo show arena, in other writing things, or coming to terms like, I might need to like get a different job. I might just need to like go get a job somewhere so I can take the pressure off of my creativity to provide.
So that the creativity isn't paying the bills.
So that exactly.
Yeah.
And I think there's this other thing that I always think about with this like in between space, where there's some sea animal, some sea creature that when it outgrows its shell, it needs to leave the shell and scuttle across the ocean floor.
Is that all mollusks? But no,
It's probably all anything like with a.
Well, it could be like a hermit crab. Hermit crabs like peace out. And they're like, I'm gonna get a new shell.
Totally, but in that in between space, they have to leave the comfort of their smaller shell. They have to make themselves vulnerable to attack or whatever it is, to find the bigger shell that they can then grow into.
And they're deeply vulnerable in that space.
Deeply vulnerable. It's dangerous. It's uncomfortable. And there's a lot of reasons why it's easier and safer to just stay in the small shell. But growth requires a stage of discomfort before it. Growth requires that sticky, what am I doing? This is unfamiliar. And the brain and the ego are always looking for the familiar. And they will always lay out in front of you all of the reasons why this is the danger zone. We don't know this. Something bad could happen. And the counter to that is something wonderful could happen also.
Yeah.
And is likely to, based on the track record of every time you take a leap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like moving to New York.
Yes.
Starting dance. It's so funny how we can look at a timeline of successes and still be like, but what if it goes wrong?
I know.
It's like, yeah, but what if it goes right?
That's what my brother says. My brother says that all the time whenever I'm expressing anxiety about, I don't know if what if this goes wrong? What if that goes wrong? And he says, but what if it all works out? What if it all goes right?
Yeah.
And 9 times out of 10, it usually does. Or it works out in a different way, but it's the wasted time and energy on the anxiety of it all. I wish I had more power and strength, and I'm working on getting it.
Yeah.
Of just, sitting back and being like, okay, maybe things will be fine and it's all going to be good, and be curious about it and excited about it instead of, beat myself up about it.
I have found that I've just been doing this lately, is just saying things over and over, just like affirmations or like things are always working out for me.
Yeah.
Just saying it before I even believe it. Things are always working out. I listen to a lot of Abraham Hicks. We'll put that in the show notes. It's also vibrational energy and frequency. And when you're looking for bad stuff or expecting bad stuff, of course the bad stuff's going to happen.
Of course.
But when you just start to expect that things are working out for you, you are raising your vibrational frequency to a place where the universe responds in kind.
Yeah, I agree.
So with that,
we are going to keep chugging along with this podcast.
yes,
We love it. It's hard though.
it's really hard.
It's really
and we
hard.
hope that you guys are loving it too. And
Yeah.
we
Any feedback we're getting from y'all is so deeply important and special to us, and it makes pulling an all-nighter, getting the editing done, worth it.
very much worth it.
But this is hard, and if you are trying to create something, we get how challenging it is, but it's so worth It's so worth doing it. It's so worth doing it.
Yeah.
Despite me pulling all my hair out and not sleeping,
Love it.
it's worth it.
I'm loving it.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
It's been so joyful.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful to be here.
Grateful for you. Grateful for you.
Aw.
Thank you guys.
And you, and you, and you, and you.
And you.
All right, we love you all. Thank you all so much.
Bye.
Like, follow, subscribe. Please like and follow and subscribe.
Please.
All right, we love you all.
Bye.
Bye.